Hi, my name is Linda, and this is the story of my son. But before I tell you who he became, I need to tell you who I was, and who I pretended to be. I was a mother who smiled when she was tired. A mother who said, "I'm okay," when she wasn't. A mother who believed that if I stayed strong long enough, my child would never see me break. My son didn't grow up in a perfect home. He grew up in a quiet one. A home where love was real, but money was tight. Where laughter existed, but so did worry. From the day he was born, I promised myself one thing: no matter what I went through, he would feel safe. I held him in my arms as a baby, rocking him in the middle of the night, whispering promises I didn't know how I would keep. Promises about a better life. Promises about strength. Promises about tomorrow. Back then, I thought strength meant never crying, never showing fear, never letting your child see how heavy the world feels. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. His father left when he was still very young. No dramatic goodbye, no long explanation, just absence. One day he was there, and then he wasn't. And suddenly, I was everything. The provider, the protector, the comfort, the answer to every question. At night, when my son was asleep, I would sit on the edge of my bed and let the silence speak. That's when the fear came. That's when the tears came. But in the morning, I wiped my face, fixed my hair, and made breakfast like nothing was wrong. Because my son was watching. He was always watching. When he asked me questions I didn't have answers to, I smiled. When he noticed I was tired, I told him I was fine. When he hugged me tightly, I hugged him back just a little tighter. I wanted him to believe the world was steady, even when my hands were shaking. As he grew older, he became curious. About life, about people, about why some kids had more than others. I taught him kindness. I taught him respect. And without realizing it, I taught him resilience. Not by giving speeches, but by showing up every day. I went to work exhausted. I came home smiling. I helped with homework while my mind raced with bills and worries. There were nights I skipped dinner so he could eat more. Mornings I prayed silently while tying his shoes. I never told him how scared I was. I told him to be brave. Even when I wasn't. When he fell and scraped his knee, I told him it was okay to cry, but only for a moment. Then I showed him how to stand back up. I didn't realize I was teaching him a lesson I had taught myself years ago. That pain is something you handle quietly. As a mother, you don't get the luxury of falling apart. You learn how to break in private. School years came and went. He grew taller, stronger, more independent, and with every milestone, I felt pride and fear. Because the stronger he became, the less he needed me. And I wondered who I would be when my job as the strong one was no longer required. But I never let him see that. I told him he could do anything. I told him he was capable. I told him that no matter what happened, he had the strength to survive it. What I didn't tell him was how many nights I stayed awake praying that those words would be true. This story is not about perfection. It's about survival. It's about love that learns how to endure. And this is only the beginning. When you become a mother, people tell you that love will guide you. What they don't tell you is that love can also feel heavy. Not because it's painful, but because it makes you responsible for another human life. Every choice mattered now. Every mistake felt larger. Every fear felt deeper. I learned very quickly that being strong wasn't a moment. It was a daily decision. Some days, strength meant getting out of bed when my body begged me to stay down. Other days, it meant pretending everything was normal so my son could have a childhood untouched by worry. I worked jobs that never felt secure. Jobs that paid just enough to survive, but never enough to relax. I learned how to stretch groceries. How to turn leftovers into meals. How to smile at school meetings while wondering if I could afford the next month. My son never knew how close we came sometimes. And I wanted it that way. He deserved a childhood that felt steady, even if my life didn't. In the mornings, I woke him up gently. I packed his lunch. I reminded him to be kind, to listen, to believe in himself. And when he walked out the door, I stood there just a moment longer than necessary, watching him go. That walk to school felt like hope. And fear, because the world is not always gentle with children who come from quiet struggle. Sometimes he came home confused, asking why other kids had things he didn't, asking why life felt different for us. I never blamed anyone. I never spoke bitterness out loud. I told him this instead: everyone has their own path. And yours is strong. I wanted him to grow without resentment, without anger, without shame, so I swallowed my own. At night, after he fell asleep, I sat with my thoughts. I replayed conversations. I worried about his future. I wondered if I was enough. Was I teaching him the right lessons? Was I protecting him too much? Or not enough? I didn't have anyone to ask. So I trusted my heart. Some nights I cried quietly in the bathroom, the door locked, the water running so he wouldn't hear. I learned how to cry silently. And then I learned how to stop. Because the next morning, he needed me whole again. I taught him responsibility early. Not because I wanted him to grow up fast, but because I wanted him to grow capable. I taught him how to take care of himself. How to help others. How to stand tall even when things felt unfair. I told him that strength wasn't about being loud. It was about being steady. He listened. I could see it in the way he handled disappointment. In the way he didn't complain easily. In the way he tried to protect me, even when he didn't fully understand what I was carrying. Sometimes I caught him watching me. Really watching me, as if he could sense that my strength was borrowed. Those moments scared me, because I never wanted him to feel responsible for me. I wanted him free. Free to dream. Free to fail. Free to grow without carrying my weight on his shoulders. So I stayed strong, even when my hands shook. Even when my heart felt tired. There were moments I almost broke. Moments when the pressure felt too much. When I wondered what it would feel like to be taken care of instead of always being the one who holds everything together. But then I would hear his laugh. Or feel his hug. Or see his pride when he did something right. And I remembered why I kept going. Because motherhood isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. And every day, no matter how tired I was, I showed up. I didn't realize it then, but in teaching him how to survive, I was also teaching myself. Brought a new set of challenges. It was a time filled with firsts. First friends, first lessons, first disappointments. I wanted to be there for every step, every stumble. But sometimes life didn't let me. I juggled work and home like a tightrope walker, careful not to fall. When my son had school events, I did my best to attend. When he needed help with homework, I stayed up late to be sure I could explain it right. But behind the smiles and encouraging words, there was a tiredness no one saw. An exhaustion I hid well. I remember one evening, after a long day, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. I thought about how much I wished I could do more. How much I wanted to give him everything his heart desired. But I knew that wasn't possible. Not then. Instead, I gave him what I could. My presence, my support, and my belief in him. I taught him that life might not always be fair, but kindness always mattered. I told him to treat others with respect, even when it was hard. Sometimes, he faced moments that broke my heart. Times when he came home hurt by words or actions from other kids. Times when I could see the weight of the world pressing on his young shoulders. I never told him how much it hurt me too. I just held him close and whispered that he was stronger than any challenge. At school, he was quiet but thoughtful. A good listener. A boy who cared deeply but didn't always say it out loud. I saw myself in him. The resilience. The quiet strength. But there were moments I worried. Worried that the world would be too hard for him. That the struggles we faced might leave scars he couldn't heal. So I prayed. For protection. For guidance. For hope. At night, I would sit alone and think about the sacrifices I made. The dreams I put on hold. The fears I swallowed to keep going. I learned to be strong by hiding my pain, because I wanted to shield him from the burden. There were nights I felt completely alone. Nights I wished for a shoulder to lean on. But I reminded myself that this was my path. My story to write. And through it all, I watched my son grow. Into a young man who carried himself with quiet confidence. Who learned from my example that strength was not about never falling, but about getting back up. Sometimes, I caught him looking at me with admiration. And sometimes, with questions he didn't ask out loud. I knew he wondered how I did it. How I managed to keep going, day after day. But I didn't have a simple answer. I only knew that I loved him fiercely. And that love gave me the courage to face whatever came next. Moment when everything changed. Not with a loud crash or sudden event, but quietly. A turning point hidden in the everyday. My son started to see the world differently. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was growing into a young man, full of questions and courage. One afternoon, I noticed him sitting on the porch steps, staring off into the distance. I asked what he was thinking. He told me he wanted to understand why life was so hard for some people, and why it seemed easier for others. I wanted to give him answers, but I didn't have them all. Instead, I told him what I knew. Life isn't fair, I said softly, but you get to choose how you respond to it. That was the moment I realized I had to be more than just his protector. I had to be his guide. I began sharing more of my story, the struggles, the fears, the moments I thought I wouldn't make it through. Not to scare him, but to show him that strength doesn't come from never falling. It comes from rising each time you do. I kept my pain hidden, but I let him see my resilience. He started asking about his father more. Questions I wasn't always ready to answer. I told him the truth in pieces, carefully measured for his age and heart. I wanted him to know that absence didn't mean lack of love. As the years passed, I watched him grow more independent. He took on responsibility with a seriousness beyond his years. Sometimes, I wondered if I had been too tough. If I had pushed him to be strong before he was ready. But then he would surprise me. With kindness to others, with laughter, with moments of vulnerability he never shared before. I realized strength wasn't just about being unbreakable. It was about knowing when to lean on others. We became partners in this journey. Two souls learning to navigate a world that doesn't always make sense. I taught him strength not through words alone, but through every choice I made. Through every sacrifice. And as he stepped closer to adulthood, I saw the man he was becoming. One who could face the world with courage, even when the road was uncertain. I never wanted him to carry my pain. But I wanted him to understand that strength comes from surviving the hard times, not avoiding them. That lesson was the greatest gift I could give. Letting go is one of the hardest parts of being a mother. It's a silent struggle, one that doesn't come with instructions or warnings. As my son grew older, I began to realize that my role was changing. He didn't need me the same way anymore. The little boy who once clung to my hand was now taking steps on his own. That brought pride, but also fear. I watched him start making decisions without me. Choices about his future, his friends, his dreams. And while I wanted to support him, a part of me worried about the unknown. I remember the day he told me he wanted to join the military. I didn't say much at first. But inside, my heart was breaking. I wanted to protect him from danger. From the fear I knew would come. But I also wanted to respect his choices, his independence. I prayed for strength, not just for him, but for myself. Because letting go meant trusting that the lessons I taught him would carry him through. There were moments I wanted to call him back, to hold him close, to keep him safe forever. But I knew I couldn't. Instead, I let him go with a heart full of hope and a prayer on my lips. The house felt emptier, the silence louder, but my love for him was louder still. I found myself reminiscing about the little things. His first steps, his first words, his laughter filling the rooms. And I realized that love doesn't hold on too tightly. Love lets go, even when it hurts. Every time I said goodbye, I whispered a prayer. For his safety, for his happiness, for his strength. And every time he came home, I reminded myself to be grateful. Because being a mother means learning to love fiercely, even from a distance. I told myself that my strength was not just for me. It was for him, for the journey he was on. For the man he was becoming. Sometimes, the weight of that responsibility felt crushing. But then I would remember his smile, his kindness, his courage. And I would carry on. Letting go is a journey, not a single moment. And every day, I chose to walk it with faith. Truths a mother keeps hidden. Not because she wants to keep secrets, but because some truths are too heavy to share. I carried pain silently, pain that didn't belong to my son, but that shaped the woman I had to become. There were nights when the loneliness was overwhelming. When the quiet felt deafening. When I questioned if I was enough. I never told him about the times I wanted to give up. The times I felt broken beyond repair. I tucked those feelings away, deep inside, and painted on a smile for his sake. I feared that if I showed my weaknesses, he would lose faith. That he would think I couldn't protect him. So I learned to hide. To keep my tears behind closed doors. To hold my breath until the storm passed. But hiding pain comes with a price. It builds walls around your heart. It makes you feel isolated. It makes you forget that you're allowed to be vulnerable. Sometimes, I wondered if my silence taught him the wrong lessons. If I showed him strength but never taught him about healing. Because real strength isn't just about holding on. It's about knowing when to ask for help. When to let others in. I wish I could go back and tell my younger self that it's okay to cry. That it's okay to lean on someone. That being strong doesn't mean carrying every burden alone. But I couldn't. All I could do was keep going. I held my fears close, but I never let them take over. I whispered prayers every night, asking for peace, for courage, for grace. And I hoped my son would grow up knowing that love is more than strength. Love is patience. Love is forgiveness. Love is knowing that sometimes, you have to be gentle with yourself. As he grew into the man he is today, I saw pieces of me reflected in him. The resilience. The kindness, the quiet determination, and I hoped that in some way, my hidden pain had helped shape his strength. Because sometimes, the hardest stories are the ones we never tell. As the years went on, I began to see the true depth of the lessons I had taught my son. He wasn't just strong on the outside, he had a strength rooted deep inside. It showed in the way he faced challenges without giving up, in how he treated others with kindness, even when he had every reason not to, in how he carried his own burdens quietly, just like I had. Sometimes, I caught myself watching him and feeling a quiet pride. Not the kind that bursts loudly, but the kind that settles warmly in your chest. He had become the man I hoped he would be, resilient, compassionate, and steady. I saw the echoes of my sacrifices in his choices. The late nights, the whispered prayers, the hidden tears, they all mattered. There were moments when he would come to me for advice, and I realized that the roles had shifted. I was no longer just the teacher, he was teaching me too. Teaching me about forgiveness, about patience, about hope. He reminded me that strength is not about never needing help. It's about knowing when to ask for it. Watching him grow gave me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. A feeling that everything we had endured was worth it. Because strength isn't just what you teach your child. It's what you build together. And in that building, love grows stronger. Resilience becomes a shared bond. Our journey wasn't easy, but it was ours. And I am grateful for every moment. To every mother listening to this story, I want you to know you are not alone. Motherhood is not a path filled with perfection. It is a journey of quiet courage, endless sacrifice, and boundless love. I taught my son to be strong, not because I was fearless, but because I chose to be brave, even when I was scared. I hid my pain, not because I wanted to be alone, but because I wanted to give him hope. And if there is one thing I've learned, it's that strength is not about never breaking. It's about rising again and again, holding on to love when everything feels uncertain. To the mothers who feel tired, overwhelmed, or afraid, your strength matters more than you know. Your love is the foundation that builds resilience. Your sacrifices do not go unseen. And your story, your truth, is worth telling. So keep going, keep fighting, keep loving, because in every moment of struggle, you are teaching your children the greatest lesson of all: how to be strong, even when they don't feel strong. Thank you for listening, thank you for being brave, and thank you for loving with all your heart. This has been Mackya Tales. Until next time, stay strong.